Okay, so subgroup mixing allows grouping of similar instruments within a mix. And why should we learn it? Well, we should learn it because faster mixing equals more money. It makes a complex mix easier to handle, and it allows you to apply effects to groups of instruments. And we're going to talk about that here in just a second, why that's cool and special. Okay, so a mix is like a hamburger. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this full screen. Boom. Yeah, lovely. Oh yeah, there's our hamburger. This is amazing. I'm loving it. Delicious, right? Yeah, I know it's delicious. You don't have to tell me. I'm going to pull this down here. So in this burger, if we look at this burger, we've got here the bun with the sesame seeds on it, and we've got the jalapenos and some bacon and stuff like that. Looks amazing. We've got some cheese in there, and you've got some lettuce and tomatoes. I'm not a huge fan of tomatoes myself, but I understand that people like them. Like, this is like quite a burger, right? It's like pretty intense burger world. In here, you've also got some, I don't know, what is that? Fried green beans? Onions? Something? All right. Okay, so in here we've got the onions in here, and you've got some ham and cheese and stuff like that. And down here, this is even like a cordon bleu burger. You've got some chicken in here and some melted cheese on it, probably some Swiss cheese or something, right? So you can see this is a pretty complex thing, right? So let's go over here. Let's just break this down. Every part of a hamburger must be made individually, right? So if you, and we can talk about this in the Zoom class later, but if you have some kind of a special, like everybody who makes burgers, who likes to barbecue or whatever, has like their own special way that they do it. They've got their special ingredient and stuff like that they like to put in it or whatever, right? But every single part of a burger must be made up individually. It's not just, it doesn't just come out of the refrigerator as a burger. So who is this? Is this somebody who's actually in the class? What is your name, dude? Tell me your name and I might tell you the PDF. But it's on Canvas if you're wondering what the PDF is. So here, oops, there we go. So you got the meat, the bun, the cheese, lettuce, onions, tomatoes, ketchup, mustard, all these parts. So here, each one of these has to be made individually. You are not a name that I recognize from the class, so it's not going to help you. The PDF is not going to help you. There is no PDF for you. So the meat, the bun, the cheese, lettuce, all this stuff here, you know, most of the time people just kind of go and get the meat from the store, they get the bun from the store, the cheese from the store. But it is possible to make these things yourself. Like if you lived out on a farm, you could make these things yourself. So you got the meat, the bun, the cheese, lettuce, onions, tomatoes, ketchup, all that stuff there. So the meat, for example, if you wanted to get real about it, you could go and kill a cow. Like that's where meat comes from. And we often don't think about that. We don't think about like how the meat, like what this means, but that's where meat comes from. Meat comes from a cow and somebody has to kill that cow. And then you have to like take the fur off the cow, you have to take the skin off, you have to take the meat off the bones, you have to grind it up, all that stuff. And that's where we usually come in. The humans, like most of us, come in at that point right there. And that's where we say, I want to get this meat, I want to get that meat. So we get the meat from the store, you pick the meat that you want, the cut or whatever it is, and then you take it home and you season it, right? And then you season the meat, and that's where you start going. So you can put here, hold on. Yeah, dude. And you're interrupting. So Laxel. If you want to stay, it's cool, but stop typing because it's getting annoying because you're just saying stuff and that's not useful. So, and everybody who does like some kind of you like to barbecue, you like to make your own burgers, they have their special things they put in. So for example, I like to put in Worcester sauce, or I'll put in garlic or onions, stuff like that into my meat before I cook it. If you want to get really fancy and unhealthy, you stick some butter up in there and it just makes that meat taste amazing, but it's also like instant heart attack. Your bun. Different types of buns equals different tastes. So if you're like, you could just get some like Wonder Bread and stick your meat on that and call that a burger. It's not going to be a great burger. Wonder Bread's not that fantastic to taste, but you could do it. I like to get like an English muffin or something like that and use that, toast it up, and that's my bun. Yeah, no problem, dude. That's cool. Just be aware. This is a class. So then you've got cheese. Sorry, let's go back to the bun here for a second. The bun, I don't know how many of you have made your own bread. Actually, more people are making bread now that we're trapped indoors, which is funny but not funny. But a lot of my friends are making bread and stuff like that nowadays. So now people are making bread more than they were before. Cheese. Cheese is something that also, like different types of cheese, all sorts of different types of cheese really changes the way that your burger tastes, right? But if you were to make your own cheese, that would take you months, like a long time. First of all, you have to milk a cow or a goat or some kind of animal that provides milk, and then you have to like deal with that milk and turn it into cheese, however that happens. I don't know how that happens. I've never made cheese. Then lettuce, onions, tomatoes, these are all vegetables that you have to plant. You have to get the right time of year. You have to get the seeds. You have to get a plot of land. It becomes super complex, but this is all the stuff that goes into a hamburger. A burger doesn't just start, like these things don't just magically grow at supermarkets. These things take time to grow and you have to, the right conditions and all that stuff. Ketchup, mustard. A lot of people are like, ketchup is tomatoes. Ketchup is kind of tomatoes. It's mostly syrup, unless you're making it yourself, like corn syrup. It's pretty crazy what's in ketchup. Mustard comes from mustard seeds. Grind them up, powder, add some water, vinegar, stuff like that, becomes mustard, right? So my point is that the same thing happens when you're talking about mixing a song. Every part of a song must be built up separately. You've got your drums, you've got the kick, the snare, the hi-hats, and the cymbals. Those become the drums as a whole. Then you've got the bass, the keys, the guitar, the vocals. But just like with a hamburger, it's made up of all these different parts of ingredients, but we don't call it, we don't say to our friends like, yo, I want to go get a meat, bun, cheese, lettuce, tomatoes, onions. We don't say that. We say, I want to go get a burger. These things together become a burger, one new thing. Same thing with music. All this stuff separately becomes a song or becomes a track, right? So you don't say like, yo, did you hear that new drums, bass, keys, guitar, and vocals from Kanye? You say that, did you hear that new song from Kanye? Did you hear that new track, that new joint, whatever words you use for this? It becomes one new unit. And this is where a lot of people don't really understand the process that much. They understand a little bit. Like people do know that there's like, songs have a bass or they have a guitar, they have a keyboard, they have a synth, they have like a kick drum and a snare drum. They got the boom, the bap, all that stuff like that. But they don't really, like the normal people on the street don't understand what goes into making a song. Just like most people who don't cook don't pay attention to what goes into the food. So let's just take this and talk about this for a second. With our drums, you've got the kick drum. Now, I don't know who in here plays drums that well. It's on that list that y'all sent me, but my memory is so bad I don't remember that. But kick drums and drums in general, if we're talking about like real drum kit, like a real drum, not like a sample, we're talking about something that, first of all, you have to get a tree, and you have to shape that tree into a drum if you're going all the way back. Zoe is nice at drums. Oh, nice, cool. Man, it's good to keep in mind for later. But like people who are like super into their drums, they talk about what kind of tree was used to make the drum. For example, birch sounds different from maple. Like you could potentially make a drum out of like plywood, I guess, but that's not going to sound nearly as good as like a nice maple drum or a birch drum or something like that. These are different trees and it makes a difference. if you are really into it as well, not only are you going to worry about the wood that you use, but you're going to worry about the type of drum head that you use. The drum head made by different companies make different types of drum heads, and they sound very different. You're going to talk about the different type of stick that you use to hit the drum, because different types of sticks have a different type of sound. And all these things make a big, big difference. And you can't just say, I want a kick. Well, what kind of kick do you want? I don't know, just make it a kick. All right, fine, let's just make it a kick, whatever. It sounds very, very different. If we just take up here, let's just see if we can play a few different kick samples. If you can go on to, here, let's go on to YouTube here for a second. Let's see. Whoops. Let's just go onto YouTube and do a search for kick samples. Kick sample pack, high quality. All right, let's listen to this. Yeah. There we go. All right. Wait. Y'all cannot hear that, can you? All right, hold on a second. Stop. Clicking the wrong thing here. Stop. Let's see how I can make it so y'all can hear this. Let's go into here and loop back. Oh, that's super annoying. Firefox. Cool. It is a university lesson. Figured it out. There we go. Now you can hear the drums. So they just got these on a loop playing at like 120 something. And you can hear how different these drums sound. But they're all kick drums. Royalty-free sound stock. That's funny. Right, so they're all super different drum kicks, but they're all kick drums, right? And that's my point, is that just saying I want a kick drum isn't going to do anything for you. You need to figure out what kind of kick drum you want to have, right? Or if you're recording it, what kind of kick drum, like what kind of like recording you're doing, the tuning, all this stuff. There's so much that goes into it. So you got your drums, the kick, snare, hi-hat, cymbals. If you're making your music from scratch, you want to choose your samples carefully. If you're producing it using samples and stuff like that, you want to choose your samples very carefully. And you'll probably you might want to go back and change stuff up when you're working on your mix. Same thing with your bass. If you're a bass player, your bass, you might be concerned about what kind of wood your bass is made from, all stuff like that. If you're making a hip-hop track or electronic music, you're going to be thinking about what your bass sample is, like what kind of sample you're using, what kind of synth you're using, stuff like that. That's why people like the Moog synthesizers so much. And as I'm sure Liv can attest, is that those things sound dope. They have a great sound to it. And so you're going to use, if you have one of those, if you're making like the right kind of music, you might want to have like a nice bass sound, the right synth for your bass. Keys, same thing. If you have access to a Rhodes keyboard, you're going to record that Rhodes keyboard, not just use some kind of cheap sample or whatever. Guitar, same thing as the bass. You'll be concerned about what wood your guitar is made from, what amp it's run through, what cabinet it's run through, and then your vocals, what microphone you use to record. So all that stuff is the first part of it, right? That stuff, what I just talked about, is the very first part. But then you've got the spices, your condiments that you can use, salt and pepper, paprika, like I don't know, onion, garlic flavor stuff, whatever it is. And that stuff is like your effects, your EQs, your compression, stuff like that. This is how a mix is like a hamburger. It's like making something from like cooking. So how do I? Come on. Nope. Really? Okay, hold on a second. Let's open that bad boy back up. Where are we? There we go. So in here, I have all these different little, these are representing microphone lines coming into a mixer. So across the top here would be all your individual channels. And these like circle things would be like your mix groups, okay? So your subgroups here. So you can see here I've got kick mic 1 and kick mic 2. If I'm actually miking up a drum kit, I would have, if I want to really get really detailed about my microphone, you've my kick drum, you can put a microphone on the inside of it and a microphone on the outside of it to capture different parts of the sound. And then you mix those together and those become the kick drum. So I'd have my microphone 1, my microphone 2, and I can balance those how I want. And then I got my snare, my hi-hat, I got my tom drums together, my overheads left and right together, and then I got my drums group. And if we look at our Pro Tools session like this, we can see this is what we're talking about here. I'm going to go ahead and mute all my stuff here. I'm going to mute my guitars, I'm going to mute my vocals. So all we're listening to is the drums. Mute all this stuff here. Oops. Okay, so here's my kick drum here, and here's my snare drum. You can hear there's the 3 toms are here as well, my 2 toms rather. So first of all, I've got my kick and my snare. There's just my kick by itself, and my snare drum is like this. Now I've got these here are grouped together into my drum group over here. I've got several different groups going on. And let's go ahead and do this. Let me go ahead and let's go save as. Let's go save as. Who are you mix to? We're going to call this one mix basics. Boop. So we've got this here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out all these other things we did before. And we'll come back to it and talk about those in a little bit here. But boop, 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 boop. Let's just do this. We're going to get rid of this one as well. Okay. So I got this drum group here, and this is going to go to my instrument group over here. Cool. So there's our drum sound. And now I've got my kick and my snare, and the balance between these, like let's say, for example, I want my kick to be louder than my snare drum. So I can turn my snare drum here like this. So now you can hear the kick is louder than the snare drum. We can go over here to our drum group and turn everything down together. So if somebody comes in and they say, hey, your drums are too loud compared to your bass, right? Or the bass is too loud compared to my drums, I can turn my drums up as a whole like this. Or I can say, I want my snare drum to be louder than my kick, so I can turn my kick down. And I can say, okay, I like that relationship between them, because remember, the mix is a relationship between the instruments. And I can take this and I can pull it in, and now I'm controlling the level of the relationship here with this fader right here. And that's what subgroup mixing does for us. Oh, every time. Hold on a second. Why are you not working? Super annoying. Okay, hold on a second. Let me load that back up again. Every time I go to a different, here, I'm just going to keep it. I'm not going to full size it. Sorry, I was trying to make my screen less cluttered, but all right. So in here you can see how all these groups work, and you can have groups within groups within groups within groups within groups. Okay, so we can see that there. So how do we create a subgroup? Well, first of all, you need to decide which tracks. Well, no, I'm not saying that that's what you would do, Zoe. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you wanted that, since never. You would never want that. Stay with me here, guys. Let's not get caught up in the minute details. That's not the point. The point is how we do this stuff. So decide which tracks you want to group, and then you create a new aux track. And then you set the track outputs so they all lead to the aux input. Then you adjust the volume on the tracks until you're satisfied with the mix, and then you adjust the volume of the group until it fits with the other instruments in the mix. Okay, so first you decide which tracks you want to group. So in this case, when you're dealing with drums, it's super, super easy. I want my drums to be grouped together. So I group all my drums together. So I've got all these here. And you create a new aux track. So I go over here. Let me just delete this one here real quick so we can start from the beginning here. Make a new one. And also, let me just show only my drums. Cool. All right. My master and my instrument group. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to make a new aux track here. I'm going to give it a name, drum group, like that. And now I'm going to set my input here to bus whatever. And if we're doing bus numbers, bus 1 and 2, for example. Now my output here of all these different ones, here, let me get rid of this one as well. Of all these tracks, all these audio tracks are going to go to this bus 1 and 2 right here. So I just go in here, hold down Option and Shift, and I set it to the same bus, 1 and 2, boom. Now they're all going to 1 and 2. Remember to solo safe your track here. And now, there we go, cool. If I listen to it, we can hear all my drums. That's loud. There we go, turn that down. All right, so in here, now I can control my drums as a whole. I don't have to go through and control each different instrument. So if I work on my mix here, let's just say I've got these two here like this. So let's just pull these down. These are my room sounds. Here's my overhead. Got that sound there like that. And let's just say, for example, that I like this mix. Well, if somebody now comes in and says, hey, your drums are too loud, well then, if I'm not using a subgroup here like this, I'd have to turn them all down individually. Now remember, we do have our Pro Tools mix groups. We've already talked about the Pro Tools mix groups before. What I would do is I would just highlight all my drums, hit Command G, call this drums, and go over here and put this into the group D here like this, and turn this down like this. And I can affect all my drums together. I can just turn them all down. And then you could say, well, yeah, okay, cool. Isn't that good enough, Tony? And the answer is, no, it's not, because here's the other part that's missing, is over here. If we go all the way back to the beginning, apply effects to groups of instruments. And this becomes really important. The more advanced you get with your mixing skills, this becomes more and more important. Understanding this part right here. And you'll hear producers and engineers, when you're reading interviews with them, you'll hear them talk about, like, I used a compression on it and it kind of pulls everything together. Okay, guys, so don't involve Q-Laxel. If you're gonna involve him, I'm gonna boot him from the class, because he's just trolling you. Don't fall for the troll. Don't fall for the troll. Don't. All right, so that's why we want to use, instead of using a Pro Tools mix group, we want to use the subgroup mix like this. So in here, we got this. So we run everything into the subgroup here. So now I could put a compression on the group of drums as a whole to kind of pull them all together in here. But I can still have individual effects on each individual instrument. And this is the really important part here, is that you still want to have effects on individual instruments. And this is what, yeah, you're probably right. Man, boop, there we go. Sorry, dude. Yeah, you're right. I should have done that a long time ago, but I was trying to be nice. But like, you know, if people come in here, don't engage them. Like, just ignore them. They'll either go away or whatever, you know. So here, all these are going into here. And we could put individual effects on each one of these drums. So for example, if I want this kick drum to be, have a little bit more low end in it, like let's say the snare drum, I want to have the snare drum take the low end out. And let's maybe pull the high end down a little bit. And let's say that's the sound I want for my snare drum. Well, now I've got that on my individual snare drum, and that's my individual sounds. That's like saying I've got my meat, it's got some salt and pepper in it, and I've got my ketchup has extra sugar in it, so it's a little bit sweeter. But then I can pull it all together, and I can put everything in here and pull it all together using some kind of compressor in here. To give it an overall sound. And I don't know if y'all can hear the difference, especially like you need headphones to even begin to hear the difference, but if you hear the difference, here's with the compressor off. And I'm going to turn the compressor on. And with the compressor on, you can kind of hear it kind of sustains things a little bit more, and everything kind of comes together a little bit more. It's a super, super subtle difference. Would you want to have individual effects on all of your instruments? No, only put individual effects where they're needed. You don't need them on all the instruments, but you're going to need them on some of them. But like, for example, the toms and stuff like that, maybe, maybe not. And again, this comes back to two things. What we talked about earlier is that it comes back to if you have like how they're recorded. If they're recorded really, really well, you don't need to affect them as much. If you like the sound of the instrument, then leave it alone. Don't add effects to everything just for the sake of adding effects. So, and you bring up a really good point. And I used to add a lot of effects into my drums, my sampled drums. Now what I do is I use the right samples. It's very rare that you're gonna like use a raw 909 or a raw 808. You're gonna actually run it through effects and stuff like that. But these days, everybody's already made sample packs. Like I just showed you like a sample pack on YouTube that you could potentially download and use, although I doubt they made those samples. Maybe they did. But they probably just got them from another sample pack because there's a million sample packs out there and they all have dope sounds. So what your responsibility is as a producer is to find the right sounds. Don't just throw a snare drum on there or a kick drum on there and be like it's done. If it's not the right sound, find the right sound. And on here, don't just use an effect just because you have effects to use. Now, there was an assignment where I told you to use 10 inserts on your song, and some people said, I didn't feel like it needed 10 inserts. Fine, I agree, that particular song doesn't need 10 inserts, but if you write to me and you tell me, I don't want to put 10 inserts because it doesn't need 10 inserts because these sounds sound fine as they are, I would say to you, great, just put a couple in there because I just want to see that you know how to put inserts in. It's not because I think that the song needs the inserts. It's more because I just want to make sure you know how to do it. So, yeah, sound selection is 85% of the job. It's, well, yes and no. I say melody and the beat that you have are a huge part of it. And then sound selection, it all goes together. But you're right. Sound selection is super, super important. You could have the same beat with whack sounds, and it's not gonna sound good. You know, and no matter if you have the wrong sounds, you can't, like, you could add effects to it all day long and it's still never going to sound amazing if you start with the wrong sounds. So Charles, I agree. As far as it goes, I agree. Yeah. All right. So that's how to create the subgroup mix. So we go in here, we add some stuff in, we mess with our levels of things. Whoops, sorry. Turn off that group. Now you notice here, I've got my room left and right, and I have to pull these up individually. I didn't do the mix group on them. What I would do with these is I would add another subgroup to these. So I'd take my overhead left and right here, and I'd make a new track. call that overhead group. And let's make another new track. Auxes, both of these auxes. And I'd call these drum room group, like that. And I would send these sounds to those. So the overhead left and right, this is a group right here. And I would send these over here to my overhead group. I think I have, there's a million. Hold on a second. Let me just go ahead and get rid of all these buses. We don't need a million buses in here. There we go. Cool. So my overhead left and right, we're going to send these to the proper buses. The drum, overhead. Are they not in here? Ah, interesting. Okay. So send it over here to drum to overhead group. Boop. Cool. And then these two here can go to drum room group. Cool. Drum room group. Awesome. And these, all these other ones here, including this one and this one, are going to go to my drum group. Awesome. Okay, so what we've got going on here is all these are going into these. So these two here are going into this one, and these two here are going into this one, and then all of these are going into this one right here. So we're making this cascade thing here. So I've got my individual sounds are going into one group, like I've got my overhead left and right going into the overhead group, and the overhead group is going into the drums group, like that. Okay, so that's how you'd put all that together. And that is your subgroup mix. And now what's cool about this is I've got my mix here, and now I can control my overall drum mix here. All right, I want to pull these over to my instrument group. So I go over here and make these go to my instrument group. And as you can see, I've got everything labeled. Nothing says bus 1 and 2, bus 3 and 4, bus 5 and 6. It did in the beginning because I was just making a point of how to do it. But you can see everything is labeled. And you want to make sure that you keep everything labeled, because having it all labeled is the proper way to do it, and making sure that it sounds, that it's organized so everything works properly. So that's what that is about there. Cool. All right. Hold on a second. Let's go ahead and view single page. Cool. So subgroup mixing, you're going to use it in a live and studio situations. You route multiple tracks through one aux channel, grouping similar instruments, all the stuff we just talked about. Drums go together, basses go together, guitars, lead, rhythm, vocals. Think sectionally. How do different instruments fit together? Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not obvious. One thing to keep in mind with this is that this part down here, sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. There's not like, sometimes you might group certain things together and then change it later because you're like, you know what, actually it's not about the name of the instrument, it's about what that instrument is doing. So if you have a guitar that's like a lead guitar, and you have that double mic'd and stuff like that, you're going to have that grouped together separately from the rhythm guitar. And then you may have your guitars grouped as a whole, maybe, maybe not. I do in this song that we've got here, but you may or may not group everything like that. It's really just up to you. You don't have to group everything the same way that I do. It's just there are times when it's going to be super easy to understand. Instruments to subgroup here. You've got the drums, kick, if there's multiple mics on a kick drum, if there's multiple mics on a snare drum, your overhead mics, stuff like that. Then you've got your bass, you've got the mic and a DI, stuff like that. Your guitar, if you have mic, DI, multiple mics, multiple amps. Guitar doubles, piano, multiple mics on pianos. Horns, if you have horns, you might want to group those together. Strings, same thing. Your vocals, multiple takes you would group together. your doubles, backing vocals, harmonies, stuff like that. These are all things that you might subgroup together. And then finally here, how to subgroup here. This is like just going over what that PDF goes over. And the PDF is in Canvas. So the aux tracks are good for three things: send effects, subgroup mixing, and external audio inputs. And so the way this works is your sends, remember, we have two different outputs for our tracks. We got the sends output right here, and you got the output, the send out and the regular out, the main out here. This is what you're going to use to subgroup from, because you want the whole audio signal going into that aux channel. You're not splitting the signal. Remember, the aux channel splits the signal. You don't want to split that signal. And that's all right down here. Subgroup mixing utilizes the output of each track. So this is a step-by-step. It's the same, it's the same thing that's in that PDF. You create a stereo aux channel, name it drum group, set up the input, bus 3 and 4, any unused stereo bus, decide which tracks you want to send to the aux, all the drums and the drum reverb, use the track's outputs because we want to send the entire signal, and then send it all to bus 3 and 4. Use whatever here. Right here, this bus 3 and 4 is the same thing that we did in step number 2 here. Okay, so let's just go through that step by step real quick. One more time over here. I'm going to delete this and all these. I'm going to send these to my main output so we can hear them all. But if I wanted to adjust the volume level on them, I'd have to turn them down individually and make sure they all stay relative to each other. But I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a new aux channel. I'm going to name it drum group. Change the bus inputs here to bus 3 and 4. Any unused stereo bus. Bus 3 and 4. And then on my tracks that I want to group, decide which tracks you want to send to the aux track, all the drums and the drum reverb, which we don't have a drum reverb aux track here. We just got the regular drums. So kick through here, and then here and here, go in here. And I'm going to send all these. I'm holding down Option and Shift. Hold down Option and Shift and click the main out here and go to bus, what did we say, 3 and 4. So send that to bus 3 and 4, boom. And now everything will go to our drum group. And I can turn that down or up, whatever. And that's down here. It says to send multiple tracks to the same location. Select the tracks, click the first track, then shift click the last track. Hold Option Shift and change whatever that says. Change the output. Yeah, so that's how you would work that. And this is just showing you with pictures the same exact thing. And this is in Canvas, obviously, it's in my notes. Okay, so a couple things real quick here. Pro Tools mix groups versus subgroup mixing, okay? With a Pro Tools mix group, each channel is still separate. You can only apply effects to each channel on its own. Pro Tools mix groups is when you select the tracks and you hit Command G, and it's what happens over here. So I can turn my groups on and off. This stuff over here on the left-hand side of the screen. That's our Pro Tools mix groups. That is Pro Tools specific. Versus our subgroup mixing, all channels become one. Any effect applied to the subgroup channel affects everything. But you still have the option to deal with the channels separately. Subgroup mixing gives you more control over stuff sound-wise, and that's why we use subgroup mixing. Down here in the bottom, one is not a replacement for the other. That is super, super true. Pro Tools Mix Groups does not replace subgroup mixing, and this is something that people always ask me about later, and it's a bit frustrating because it's in the notes here, and now it's on a video that's going to be put up on YouTube. So there's lots of reasons to get this right and no reasons to get it wrong. It's important to understand when an effect should be applied to individual channels versus groups of channels. One is not a replacement for the other. Everything has its reason. So you have to experiment with this. This is really important to experiment with this and kind of figure out when you want to use one way or the other. So this is another example of how this all works. Here we've got our tracks here. This is like in Pro Tools. you've got each track has its output here. The blue effect, and this is us talking about like how these different instruments would affect different things, which I've already gone over earlier in the class. But the blue effects here affect each individual instrument, and the red effects over here affect all the instruments together. So this one here would affect your kick drum, your snare, your hi-hat, whatever. And then here it would affect everything as a whole. All right, so let's take one last look at the drums here and talk about something in here. And that is a reverb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two different places to put a reverb on these drums. One place is going to be inside the group, another place is going to be outside the group. So I'm going to make a new reverb here. Aux channel for a reverb, reverb drums. And I'm going to put the reverb on here. First of all, we're going to put it outside of our drum group. And we're going to put a pretty heavy compression on the drums, just so we can hear this. I'm going to definitely over compress the drums. This is the reverb that comes with Pro Tools. I'm going to put this room on here. Let's put room 2. And we're going to send out the kick and the snare, just the kick and the snare to this reverb. Reverb drums. There you go. Cool. Here's my kick and my snare. So we can hear they're being sent over. If I want to send, like, let's send less kick drum. And there's my reverb sound. Now here's the interesting thing about this is this reverb sound is not going to my drums, into my drum group here. Let me put some compression on this, on the drums. I'm going to compress it quite a bit. Okay, cool. So we got that going on there. And now let's listen to this drum, the reverb here. Now what you'll notice with this is that the drums sound overcompressed, but the reverb sounds relatively natural. What we're going to do here is change it around. Hello, Reaper Talisans. God, okay. That's a long name. So the reverb sounds pretty much normal right now because it's outside of our compression. So let's listen to this one more time. No reverb. Yes, reverb. Now, because the reverb is outside of the drum group, if I turn the drum group all the way down, we're hearing nothing but reverb right now. And everything's like I said, super overcompressed. Not a sound that I would recommend, but just for this example. So this is this example here. I've got my kick, snare, hi-hat. These are all grouped to the drums, but they're being sent over to my reverb over here. The level of the reverb is not affected by the level of the subgroup. Use this setup if you want to heavily compress the drums, but want a more natural reverb sound. So if you want your reverb sound to be more natural, but you want the drums to have heavy compression, you would use this setup. Now, if I want my reverb to be compressed with the drums, we're going to use a second setup. And it's the same thing, except now my reverb is also going into my drum group here. So let's go over here and take a look at this. I'm going to go in here to my reverb drum. I'm just going to move it over here. You don't have to move it around. I'm going to do that so that we can see things a little bit more easily. Send it over here to bus 3 and 4. Actually, I'm going to change all these that say bus 3 and 4. Well, no, whatever, I'll just leave it there. Just know that this is going to my drum group. So now when we play it, watch what happens. Now that reverb is crushed because of the compression. So we're going to go in here and I'm going to change it to go back out to my main output. I'm going to take it out of the drum group here. Now listen to it again. So the drums are overcompressed, the drums are quite loud and super compressed, but that reverb is not in there as much. Now I'm going to put the reverb back into my drum bus. And you hear how different that sounds? And obviously that's not the sound you'd be going for. Like, you're not trying to get that sound in your song unless you are, but it's definitely a different sound. And that's what I wanted to show you here, is that where you have the routing really changes the sound of your mix a lot, like a lot. Okay, so what I might do with that, like let's say I like that, but it's just too much reverb in general. You can pull it down, and now you've got a better, more manageable sound. Like, that's too much. But that sounds like really big and pretty cool. And let me show you an example of this in action. Let's go over here to our Spotify, and let's play When the Levee Breaks from Led Zeppelin. This is one of the first songs that used this technique, where they took the drums and they put them in the foyer of a mansion out in the countryside. They had a lot of the entrance was a big 2-story area, and they put microphones up top and they put the drum kit in the bottom, and they used the room sound, and then they compressed it a lot to get this really new drum sound. This is a drum sound that had never been heard before this time. Right? So you get that really, here, let's play it back from the beginning again. You get that super, oh, it's a great drum recording. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Gio. It's such a cool drum recording. That's what they did. They took it and they recorded the drums. They put the mics on the drums, but then they also hung microphones up from the ceiling in this giant room that was like a house. It wasn't even a recording studio, it was just a house. And then they compressed everything together. Totally not a normal drum sound. And then it's been sampled by a bunch of different artists and stuff like that to use in recordings and things like that. A really famous one was the Beastie Boys in, which song was it? Rhymin' and Stealin', I think, on the first album. Used that. That was what's his name? The producer for that album was the dude who formed Def Jam. His name escapes me. Somebody tell me his name. Somebody tell me his name. Looks like a mountain man. Does anybody know? I can't think of it right now. Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. Hold on. Now I want to look it up. Rick Rubin. Yes, thank you. Okay, good. I knew somebody knew it. Yes, yes, yes. Rick Rubin. Yeah, and you know, and he sampled that for that first album there. Anyway, so that's what that sounds like in a real recording. That's like what you can make that, obviously, you know, different from what I have going on, but yeah, cool. And that brings us to the end of me talking. So what we're going to do is this. Let me go ahead and stop the recording.